Yama everyone, my name is Kirsten Tarpany and I'm a proud Gamilaroi woman.
Yama. I'm Marina Martinello and I'm a proud Arundel woman.
Welcome to the series Yarning About. Throughout the series we'll be yarning about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, culture and issues impacting them, and as well as debunking myths.
We've been inundated with questions from the UC community, which is fantastic, and as a result may not get to all of these questions over these first episodes. To make sure that we address all questions, we will add to this series over the coming months. We will also be answering questions online through the new Yarning About landing page.
We will share with you our individual thoughts, perspectives and experiences,
which you will see highlighted through our diverse responses and conversations.
In this episode, we'll be yarning about general topics that have been raised.
Would you like to go first, Wendy?
Or
shall I?
No, I'll go first.
Okay.
What do you wish people knew about
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and culture?
I wish that people knew how peaceful our culture is and how beautiful it is.
Well, I wish they understood several things. Firstly, the extraordinary longevity and the skills it takes to survive for 125,000 years on this continent.
We're diverse and we're different. There are Christian Aboriginal people, there are Muslim Aboriginal people, there are Aboriginal people who live traditionally on land, there are Aboriginal people who've lived in urban cities for generations.
Each Aboriginal person they're on a different journey. I think it's important to remember that, and you know, some people are just finding out that they're Aboriginal, or you know, they've been raised like from day one, all their traditions like and culture and being taught so much. So it's just being respectful, and I think just understanding that everyone's on their own journey just like individuals are.
I mean, I'd love for non-Indigenous Australia to understand too that, you know, Aboriginal people were here through 2 ice ages. That's absolutely incredible. When you think about the climate change that went through in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture still survived during that period. And also some of the structures that we have here in Australia, particularly the Barorona fish traps, are actually older than the pyramids.
We are the longest surviving culture in the world. We survived assimilation. It's over 60,000 years worth of custom, language, people, traditions. I think we've had such a terrible past that people overlook how beautiful the culture really is and how strong our connection is to our land and our family and our people.
The extraordinary sophistication and complexity of our law systems, our languages, our customary practices, and the very wide moral basis upon which we manage community and generations and families and obligation, which are all things that white Australia seems to have missed.
Well, we're a good people, and like other human beings, we get angry and emotional. We are part of the human race, and I think that because of the colonial mentality in the country, non-Indigenous Australia, even good people have been led to believe and programmed to believe that we are less than, and we're not. We are equal to.
And we've all interbred, you know, with various different ethnicities as well. So Aboriginality is not something that's fixed. It's something that, you know, there are a whole heap of different interpretations. So it's probably a tie between that and understanding that for Aboriginal people, our ways of knowing and being have utility and have use in modern society. We don't learn about them because we want to look at them as interesting little oddities or cultural artefacts. We learn about them because they have value and use in our current society.
There is so much to learn from us, just of how we are, how we treat our family, how we support our family, how we're there for one another and we'll back one another, literally till the day we die.
I'll just add that our culture's there to be shared.
My turn or yours?
What is the correct way of saying Aboriginal people?
Aboriginal person, Indigenous person specifically, Ngunnawal man, etc.
This person just doesn't want to offend by using a less preferred term, which is perfectly understandable.
Well, that's a really tough one, Jenny, because we've tried to come to an agreement here on campus, and our diversity of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff, we've got to the point where at the moment we still use two terms we use, Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander person, or Indigenous Australian.
People do have preferences,
Yeah.
but it's okay to ask.
Yeah.
In that case, do you prefer that I use the term Aboriginal or Indigenous or First Nations or whatever it might be?
So here's where I come down on the issue, okay? I understand, so a lot of First Nations people, a lot of people object to the use of the word Indigenous. And the reason being, I think, is that it's a Western or an English word which doesn't fully capture who we are as a people, and I understand that.
I think, again, it's subject to the person who and how they want to be identified. Aboriginal people is respectful. Indigenous person is respectful. It's if that person prefers, so for example, me, a Yuin woman, then that's okay as well. It's again what that individual would like to be preferred.
I call myself a Koori. I am a First Nations Australian person, not Indigenous, not Aboriginal. This is how I refer to myself.
This one is, I think it's very personal to people, and don't be afraid to ask, how do you want to be identified? Because I prefer Aboriginal person, Aboriginal woman, Gamilaroi woman, but some people prefer First Nations. I think there are a lot of terms out there, and I can't speak for anyone but myself, but I think the best thing to do is just ask.
Some people like to be identified as a Jagera man, me. Some people like to be identified as Indigenous, some as Aboriginal, a whole heap of different ones.
Aboriginal woman, Gamilaroi woman, if people know my nation and where I'm from, I think just respectfully ask.
But I also feel like we communicate in the English language, and that can be problematic when we're trying to put forward these difficult concepts. As a result, the way that I approach it is when I'm in a room with someone, I'll ask them.
A couple of our community here are dead against using the word First Nations because they see that as a Canadian or a North American term. So I think it's just important to ask someone what they prefer. And at the end of the day, I don't think you're always going to get it right. We don't always get it right.
The important thing is to ask people what they're comfortable with when you're first interacting with them, because you're going to get 70 different responses. Now this can be particularly problematic, right? When you're standing up and you want to welcome somebody, or you want to acknowledge country, and you freak out about what you're supposed to say here, what the respectful thing to say is. In those cases, my way is always to default to whoever the local people are. I acknowledge the elders of Ngunnawal country because this is the place I'm at the moment. You still might have people coming up and bussing you about it and getting upset with you. But if you can say at the end of the day, and you can say to them, look, Auntie, Uncle, I'm really sorry. That was what I was taught. Can you please help me understand better? They're not going to smack you with it. They might be a little bit upset with you, but isn't that a great opportunity to learn? I realise that doesn't give you a definitive answer, but it's important that you realise that there is no definitive answer here. I'm sorry, brother. Is there anything you want to say about that?
I think this comes back down to that diversity of Aboriginality and what people prefer. Some people are going to prefer to, be known as Aboriginal or Indigenous, and it's going to be a preference. For me personally, I don't mind either way. For me, the connotation is just to describe the same thing using two different words there. But that's just how I've been brought up, sort of thing. I wasn't brought up with any negativity around either one of those two terms or anything. But some people have been brought up with some different emotions or connotations attached to ask and to find out what someone's preference is.
Yeah.
This one's a good one. How do you prove Aboriginal heritage?
Aboriginal people, it's a case of they know who they are, where they come from, and they can recognise their own peoples.
From a young age, I was lucky. There's stolen generation, so a lot of people know that they can identify that they are Aboriginal but don't know how. I was lucky enough to know exactly where I came from.
I've heard stories of people who may not have been to their country ever or visited in a long time, but they'll go and visit that country and they're recognised by elders in the community that can look at them and say, you're such and such's boy. And they'll know that that's their family.
There's a certificate of Aboriginality, and that doesn't always help prove that you're Aboriginal without the community.
Aboriginal people go by that sense of feel and belonging, as opposed to the, you need to have hard evidence.
Hard evidence, yeah.
The community knows, and the family knows, and therefore the community knows.
Do you want to get the next question?
Sure. As most of us are mixed heritage.
Do you also relate to those parts of heritage
that are non-Indigenous?
My mother shares the Aboriginal heritage. Her mother was Aboriginal and her father was Italian. And my father is Spanish, so I got a nice mix going on.
I'm just going to speak in terms of my husband. So he's Māori, so that's mixed heritage, and then his mama is Kiwi.
I have family that are foreign, and I strongly connect with that part of my life as well because it's how I was created.
I love relating to different heritages. I think it's definitely something that everybody should embrace. It's a gift.
That makes you up to be who you are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm the same, and my mother's Aboriginal, father's Italian, and we also have Chinese in our background as well.
I had a non-Indigenous father, and my mother's Aboriginal, Ngunnawal. But my father's family didn't approve of my mother being Aboriginal, and so my mum never really felt welcome when she lived amongst these people. So they separated when I was a young age, and I just grew up Aboriginal out in the bush with my grandparents and my mum and a lot of family members. So I mainly know myself as Aboriginal, even though I'm fair-skinned. But I do have love in my heart for my father, and not all my father's family was that way. I have a cousin that I've made contact with, and I keep in contact with her in recent years, but no, I never really, I just felt unwanted by my white side, but I felt wanted by my Aboriginal side, so as far as I'm concerned, I'm Aboriginal with a white father, who I care about, of course.
It's very hard to find any Aboriginal person these days who are considered full. These days I'm Aboriginal, and I also have X and X as part of me, and that's okay, that's genealogy, I guess.
There's definitely a connection there, and I love celebrating, his culture and traditions, and can't wait to have future babies to then celebrate that as well, for them to be, to run around little Aboriginal Māori.
There are always different mixes of Aboriginal and, say, Cook Islands, or Aboriginal and British, which is very common. And that's okay, you're allowed to identify if you feel like you can connect to that.
My turn.
Is it?
Is it?
Yes.
What does being Aboriginal mean to you?
What's the best thing about being Aboriginal?
Oh, what's the best thing? Just our culture,
question.
like our culture. It is just the most beautiful culture.
Really
and I
is.
think family, like the connection that we have with our family.
Being Aboriginal means that connection to family, for me, is a huge thing. I'm very, very family oriented. So that's, and that's actually the best thing about being Aboriginal for me as well, is
How close you are to your mob.
how close I am to my mob, yeah.
We've been here for 65,000 years, like that is crazy. And we're still living and thriving, it's just, it's so special to me to, be Aboriginal for so many reasons.
I feel so proud, I feel so proud when I sit up and say, I am an Aboriginal woman. Like it gives me goosebumps. Like I feel so proud to be Aboriginal.
And just, yeah, for what the people who have gone before us and our ancestors and family, what they've done, like
the
that,
resilience.
yeah,
like,
the resilience is massive. I think that is what has built me, and for me to be standing here today, like, and literally doing this, like, you know.
You might not be aware of this, but from the moment you were born, I used to say to people that I didn't have to have my son. I didn't have to have a son because my sister had my son for me. So it's that.
That's me.
It's that relationship that I have. So you and your brother are my sons. That's how I think of you. And Leandra is your auntie's, is your mum's daughter.
Yeah.
It's just that
how it is, yeah.
that feeling, that connection. So for me, that's the best thing about being Aboriginal.
What a deadly answer. Good job.
If you had to pick one thing, what would be the best thing, do you think?
I think one thing.
Yeah, even though that's hard.
Yeah, I think the way our family is there for each other, and no matter what, like in big or small terms, like the way that we show up for each other, and even just like, and not just blood family either, like
that's right.
just the way that we just show up for each other. And once you have that connection of being Aboriginal, like you really do just show up at anything you need. Like someone will, like your aunties, cousins, brothers, sisters, like they will just, anything you need.
Yeah,
they're like,
drop of a hat.
Yeah, exactly, let me give it to you. Like you're traveling through town and I haven't spoken to you in 10 years, stay at my place. Like, don't get a hotel. Like,
I got a lounge, I got a mattress. Yeah,
exactly. Like they
100%.
just, like, yeah, it's just the way that we just show up for each other.
Yeah,
It's
definitely,
really
that's mine too, yeah.
I'll pick a big one for you, brother. Okay. I would like to seek feedback from my friends and colleagues who identify as Indigenous. That's us, brother.
To know if I'm approaching them in a culturally appropriate way.
I don't want to make it awkward.
But my concern comes from recent awareness of perspective
Of issues and contexts raised,
And I feel a bit paralysed.
as to how to ask and seek this feedback.
because I'm not too sure how to do so.
They want to know if they're approaching their friends in a culturally appropriate way, but are worried that even asking the question is culturally inappropriate.
If you can ask that question, then you're going to get the response. If someone gets offended by your question, then so be it. How you react to that, how you go about bettering that in the future, it speaks more to the character and what you're trying to do than asking what might be a culturally insensitive question to start with.
A question like that also depends on the relationship that they have with an Indigenous person, if they have one in their life, a colleague who is Indigenous. Depending on the relationship is how you should be approaching it, and in the right situation.
If they are friends and colleagues, hopefully they will be able to interact with you in a respectful way, and you will be able to just ask them, hi, is how I'm referring to you comfortable for you?
Now for me, that means that you made a relationship with these people and they're your friends. They're definitely the people to start with. We don't, so because it's anonymous, we don't know whether you're one of your friends. Maybe we are, we don't know. But say we're not. You wouldn't come to me in Stirling and ask these questions, would you? Because you don't know us that well, So, but the people you've built a relationship with, they're the ideal place to start. So I applaud you on realising that, those are the people that you should start with, making sure that you're working with them in a culturally appropriate way.
It's just all about common sense. You wouldn't ask derogatory questions, of course, but you by asking questions, you do actually show a genuine desire to want to get to know and understand about Aboriginal Australia.
I think it's also about, like, if you say it in the most respectful way, that person can help educate you, and if you're open to education, then they can do nothing but respect you for asking instead of assuming.
I'm glad that they are becoming aware of the perspective of issues and contexts raised. I really am glad, and I'm glad to see they're thinking about it, but I can only agree. If they're colleagues and friends, then the usual respect.
Now, I understand equally that the problem is for you, you probably think you're going to risk the relationship, or you're going to get people upset with you, you're going to lose a friend because you're asking difficult questions. And if the relationship's strong, and you worked really hard at being strong, it can withstand that kind of thing. It can withstand you being a little bit ignorant. it probably can't withstand you being disrespectful. Ignorance is the stuff that comes beforehand when you're asking questions. Disrespect is what comes when you don't ask questions and just say, this is the way we're going to do things.
Or the justification is something that you've been told otherwise, or for something.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Right. I like that.
Well done. We're solving all the problems here, bro.
Good team.
You got this, yeah.
Last question.
No, last question.
Last question.
Lucky last.
Oh, you get the last one.
I do get the last one.
My daughter is of Aboriginal descent, the Ngunnawal tribe. She is the cousin of our Aboriginal elder Auntie Agnes Shea. I've heard, in brackets, correct me if I'm wrong, that as an Aboriginal person she may be able to obtain her own piece of land here in Canberra. How do you navigate this process? Thanks for your answer. All answers are much appreciated. Well, whoever gave your daughter that information about getting your own piece of land has provided her with false information. We don't get our own piece of land. We are still fighting for land rights. So if your daughter is a cousin of our Ngunnawal, our senior Ngunnawal elder, I advise her to come to the Ngunnawal Centre, and if she doesn't know Auntie Agnes, I will arrange contact with her. I should smile, like I'm talking real angry today.